This is the minor side of life.
And they're pretty, what's funny is they're like, why would I go back to, name a place,
Right.
name a minor league city? And you're probably biased because you're a city and you are. But would you have gone back to any of the places on your way, like any of your stops?
It's really interesting that you mention that, and this is kind of peculiar. I have somewhat repetitive dreams
Uh-oh.
about going back to El Paso and more so even Huntsville. They're very strange, they're bizarre circumstances. Very rarely have I ever had a dream about going back to Omaha, but in particular El Paso and even more so Huntsville. When El Paso got AAA, and advanced to AAA, I thought about what would it be like to go back there with a real ballpark downtown.
Yeah. And
Definitely was,
they do very,
yeah,
very well.
it was something that was intriguing to me. Um, Huntsville, I never really thought about going back to
Until now.
until
Until
now,
now.
only because the stadium was so bad and there wasn't a lot of support for the team when I was there, and it was very frustrating when I was there. So when the team originally started there in 1985, the A's were there, and Canseco passed through there, McGuire passed through there. A lot of well-known, very good A's players had come through Huntsville, but it was also at a time in the late 80s, early 90s when you didn't have social media, when you didn't have the internet, what it is now compared to what it was back then in its very infancy. You
Yeah, I
didn't
don't
have a
think in
lot of access, let's
1989
say, to Baseball
there was
America.
none of that.
So there were a lot
Not
of
even
people
close.
that were somewhat caught up in the past, even though they really weren't very attached to it and didn't have the means to become attached to it like they did during the 5 years when I was there. So that was very frustrating. We had a lot of good players pass through there when I was in Huntsville from 2005 through 2009 with Milwaukee. Ryan Braun, Giovanni Gallardo, Jeremy Jeffress, Lorenzo Cain, Alcides Escobar. That's just off the top of my head. So people, for whatever reason, did not really fully understand how good the players were there, and how many of them went on to achieve a modicum, if not more, success in the big leagues. Omaha, it's interesting. I went back there a little bit more than a year ago for a wedding for our good friend Adam McLaughlin.
Hey, Mac.
Hey, Mac. Uh, there he is. And I had a great time going back there. I saw a lot of good friends, spent a lot of time with people that I hadn't seen in a while, and that meant something to me, to be able to do that and to continue that relationship. But after living in New York for 4 years, I don't think I would go back to any of those places, to be quite honest with you. And now, especially given all the changes that have taken place in minor league baseball, I just think it's a completely different environment, completely different world. And I don't know how appealing working in minor league baseball would be now, given the structural changes as compared to the way it used to be when I was there.
When you say structural changes, what do you mean?
Well, you don't have as many teams. You have Major League Baseball having a
But what
much
does that
greater
have to do? What
hand.
does that have to do with your day to day?
I don't know. I just get this feeling that there's this kind of like presence looming over you. And again, I'm not living it, and I'm just judging on what I've read and what I've heard. Um, so I just don't know if it would be as appealing. And maybe that's just my opinion. It just seems like there's kind of this big hand lurking over everything and trying to orchestrate things, and trying to be much more involved and have much more say, than maybe what it used to be.
I don't know. We'll see how it plays out,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
but I think, and it's always like when minor league baseball would put together the marketing, like some of their own marketing deals, and there'd be like these like national, Uncle Ray's potato chips, and I don't know, that was some of the other big ones that they've had over the last, I don't know, let's say 8, 10 years, something like that. Um, I think you'll have that. They'll try to do that, and then they'll kind of find that um, the best way to go about it is just added value, because if they'll wind up just having the same sort of success in those at minor league wide sponsorships and stuff like that. Because otherwise, what's their real skin in the game to me? It's like they don't. They just want to make sure it's not a shit place. And I don't think they're going to stick their nose into it. They'll stick their nose in enough that they made their point. They very much made their point.
Yes, I agree.
So that's all they need to do, I think. I don't think they're really going to stick their beak in too much on too many things. It's almost like, and it's always kind of been like this. Like if you imagine a tree with two main branches, and then the branches sort of branch off as trees do, but where you have as that's your organization, you have marketing on one side, and part of that tree on the other side of the tree is actual baseball operations. Because if you think about it, if you have an office of 30 to 40 people, half of them are salespeople. And how much, contact and stuff like that does somebody have where they have to be dealing with any sort of baseball operations? And you're obviously the wrong person to say that to. But in the grand scheme of things, in terms of baseball operations, if you're a 30 to 40 person staff, your baseball operations, the people that touch baseball operations, is probably 6, 7 people. Like how many people does it need to be?
Right.
You know what I
that's
mean?
a fair point. Yeah.
So there's a whole big part of the organization that kind of doesn't give a shit. That's why I'm surprised more teams this year didn't just make their own leagues. Just put together 4 to 8 teams in some sort of local private league. With just you could have found players. You could have found, you definitely could have found